Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. It's the post-game pod. We'll talk about the Timberwolves' historic third quarter, how they got it done. 52 points in a quarter. Ant drops 44. Randle's great. The Wolves beat the Grizz. It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Lockdown Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy Timberwolves game day. The last back-to-back of the season is here. The Wolves are in action tonight against the Brooklyn Nets. A massive game with massive implications. That's just where we are in the season. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But today, the focus, it's the post-game pod after all, is about the Wolves' offensive explosion against the Grizzlies on Thursday night. As they all are now, a must-win game, especially on the heels of the collapse in Milwaukee on Tuesday. The Timberwolves scored the most points in a quarter of any quarter in franchise history and of any quarter in the NBA this season in the third quarter of this game. We'll talk about what happened, how they did it. We'll talk about Ant and Randle both playing great. And the Wolves doing enough to hold down the non-Bane, non-Jaren Jackson, or excuse me, non-Bane. They did a good job with Jaren Jackson, non-Bane, non-John Morant players on the Grizzlies. All that on the show today. A big thank you off the top for making Lockdown Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Lockdown Wolves. You can also watch on the Lockdown Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the newsletter. You can subscribe at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get a daily newsletter Monday through Friday to your inbox. All things Wolves, all things NBA. There's some great national content on there. There's a nice Wolves roundup that'll show you like key Wolves links from around the internet. It's really kind of a nice one-stop shop for everything Wolves and everything NBA. Of course, content from yours truly as well in there. So be sure to check that out. Subscribe at LockedOnDaily.com. All right. So coming into this game, we don't need to rehash what happened Tuesday. We spent Wednesday's show and Thursday's show doing it. Talked a little on the postcast last night with Jack Borman about it. The Wolves collapsed in Milwaukee on Tuesday. They were up 24 with 10 minutes left in the game. 24 points in the fourth quarter. The Bucks went on a 26-2 run, outscored the Wolves 40-13 in the fourth quarter, and the Wolves lost by 7. Devastating. If they had won, they would have been, I think, fourth in the West, given where everybody else landed, and then they plummeted to 8th. Even with the win over Memphis on Thursday, the Wolves are still 8th in the West, but they control their own destiny as far as getting out of the play-in. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. All that to say, that doesn't matter if they don't win Thursday. If they lose Thursday, we're talking play-in city. Like, that's very likely where the Wolves are headed if they lose on Thursday night. Instead, they went into Memphis ready to roll. The Grizzlies were without Jalen Wells, which, not the biggest name, but he frustrated Ant when he guarded him the last two times that Minnesota played Memphis back in early January. Remember, the Wolves lost to the Grizzlies twice by 2 points each game. And Jalen Wells was the primary defender against Anthony Edwards. He forced 11 turnovers against Ant. He held him below 40% shooting in those games as the primary defender. Jalen Wells was out with a broken wrist. And, of course, Brandon Clark is out due to the season ending knee sprain. So he's out. And those are both players that have killed the Wolves. Brandon Clark, especially in the offensive glass, the energy, just the bounciness he plays with. Jalen Wells with the way he frustrates Ant. And those are key injuries. Minnesota, knock on wood, remains healthy and has been for a little while now. The keys to this game that we talked about on yesterday's show were Memphis turns teams over for the most part, and the Wolves turn the ball over a lot. Memphis is like, I think, 14th in the league in opponent turnover rates. They do a good job of turning opponents over. Minnesota does a bad job at not turning the ball over, especially recently. They've gone through kind of fits and starts here. They were great early in the year with not turning it over. Or excuse me, other way around. They were horrible early in the year. They got better January, February-ish. And then, recently it's been a problem again, like Milwaukee Tuesday. And also pace-wise. Memphis is the fastest team in the league in terms of pace. The Wolves are still kind of bottom 5, bottom 6 in terms of how fast they play. And so that was a concern coming in. Early in the game, this game was played at a Memphis Grizzlies pace. And yet Minnesota shot the ball so well. They're actually up 6 at the end of the first quarter. Both teams were just lights out. Second quarter, the pace continued, and Memphis dropped 41 points in the second quarter alone and took a 5-point lead into the locker room at halftime. And it kind of flipped on its head midway through the second quarter when Memphis kept making threes and the Wolves just, eventually missed a few, right? Like both teams were shooting hot. The pace was fast. That benefited Memphis because they were beating the Wolves at something they do well, which is shoot threes. And they were just playing faster, getting more possessions, turning the Wolves over a little bit early. And ultimately that led to a 5-point lead at halftime for Memphis. Ant was great. I think he had 24 in the first half. He made like his first 3 or 4 threes. He made his first 6 shots from the field. He was making mid-range jumpers. He got to the paint a couple of times, was really, really playing well. Minnesota generated some turnovers and was scoring off turnovers as well early, but this was a 5-point Memphis lead at halftime. And then the third quarter explosion goes down. 52 points in the third quarter for Minnesota. I said this before. I'll say it again. The highest scoring quarter of any team in the NBA this season and the highest scoring individual quarter in franchise history for Minnesota. It was unbelievable. And like Jack and I talked about this right after we finished on the podcast, the postcast last night. I hosted the Locked On Wolves postcast. If you're not familiar, it's the audio episode before this one in your feed. We do it on YouTube on Locked On Sports Minnesota live after every game. Jack's always there. Occasionally I'll fill in as host. So I did it last night with Jack. And we were talking, we should have spent more time talking about just how crazy the third quarter was on the show last night. I mean, it was absolutely nuts how much scoring the Wolves did, and just how good their stars were. In the third quarter alone, Anthony Edwards had, let's see, I lost it. I think he had 18 points in the third quarter alone. 5 of 5 shooting in the third quarter from the field for Ant. 3 made threes on 3 attempts. 5 of 5 at the free throw line. In the third quarter alone, Julius Randle had 14 points on 8 shots. Was 2 of 3 outside the arc. Randle hit a couple of threes early, a couple of threes in the third quarter. He was awesome in this game. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Rudy Gobert, who I think had 1 bucket at halftime, I think he had 2 points, had 9 points in the third quarter alone, 3 of 3 from the field and 3 of 4 at the free throw line. The Timberwolves stars combined, Ant, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert combined for 41 of the Wolves' 52 points. They shot 14 of 16 combined. And Minnesota as a team only missed 3 shots from the field in the third quarter. Memphis didn't get a rebound until like the last few minutes of the third quarter per the TNT broadcast. I don't remember the exact timestamp, but it was like under 5 minutes to go in the quarter before Memphis got a rebound, period. The Wolves went on a 24-2 run to open the quarter and completely bust open the game. This to me was a fantastic response, being down 5 at halftime on the road, hostile environment. Game is also super important to Memphis, obviously. And with how well the Grizzlies shot the ball in the first half, it would have been easy for the Wolves to be like, all right, not our night because these dudes can't miss. They didn't pack it in. And which is, we shouldn't have to pat them on the back for it, but that's a real thing, right? Human nature. Here we go again sort of thing after losing a tough game Tuesday. They did a good job at not allowing themselves to be completely rattled. They stayed aggressive in the third quarter, and that was awesome. When Ant was getting blitzed, we saw Julius Randle being aggressive. They didn't blitz Ant a ton. They started to once he got off to such a hot start. They just putting 2 on the ball on him. And Randle then would go to work on the other side. And Julius Randle, other than maybe a couple possessions like second quarter when Memphis went on the run, there were some questionable Randle possessions. Besides that, he was phenomenal in this game. 31, 10, and 5 for Julius Randle, one of his better games in a Wolves uniform. He made 5 threes, like I said, 2 very early in the game and 2 during that run in the third quarter. 2 of his, that's where 4 of his 5 threes came from. And Ant was fantastic as well. Just a really, really impressive third quarter where everything, like, firing on all cylinders. And the defense was good. It helped that Memphis then became shell-shocked and really, struggled in the third quarter or offensively themselves. That was huge. So it was overall 24-2 run for Minnesota. There was a 15-0 run in the middle there. Minnesota scored like all the points in the paint in the third quarter. Memphis didn't do anything in the paint. And just awesome for Minnesota. Franchise record, 52 points in a quarter. They missed 3 shots the entire quarter, 18 of 21, 7 of 8 on threes. The only missed 3 was a heave at the end of the shot clock from Julius Randle in the left corner, which led to an Ant putback slam. They were 9 of 10 at the free throw line. We talked about the Stars scoring 41 of the Wolves, 52 points in that quarter. Just an amazing frame for Minnesota. I want to talk about some of those individual performances. I also want to talk a little bit about a couple other categories that the Wolves did really well in that were important for them to perform well in against Memphis. And we'll close by talking a bit about the weekend. I'm not really going to get into the Brooklyn matchup tonight. We'll talk briefly about that, but then also like the next time I do a regular show on Monday, we'll know where the Wolves are seated And there's still a wide range of possibilities. We'll get into that a little bit here shortly. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. If any player scores 50 or more in a game during the regular season, so you got a few days left, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Our guy Ant almost did it last night, but keep an eye out tonight. You could get a nice feast on Saturday if somebody drops 50 plus. It doesn't have to be a Wolves player. Any player in the NBA tonight, if they drop 50 or more, you can celebrate tomorrow. You could order wings, pizza, burgers from your favorite local spot delivered straight to your door. Maybe you just want to stay up and watch. I would assume there's some games tomorrow night. I know basically everybody plays tonight and Sunday. Stay up late watching highlights maybe from that 50-point game on Saturday. Maybe you just need a midnight snack. Use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50, that's NBA50, from noon to midnight. After a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants, must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right. So the Timberwolves' third quarter was phenomenal. They were up a billion points going to the fourth quarter. It still didn't really feel safe. They were up 21, I believe, going to the fourth, which, of course, they're up 20 in Milwaukee on Tuesday going to the fourth. That didn't turn out great. Things got a little dicey, kind of middle of the fourth quarter. Memphis went on like a quick 8-0, 10-0, 12-2 run, something like that. It actually got down to 10 points. And Minnesota had a nice ATO where they ran a pick and roll. Rudy got the ball on the short roll, kicked it to Jaden in the right corner. He knocks down a three. And then even after that, there was another mini Memphis run that, Julius Randle had a nice bully ball move, scored at like from 10, 12 feet. And they, there were, during that stretch, there was a bad Randle turnover. There was an Ant turnover in the backcourt. He got there was a stop. I think he got the rebound and then just like I think it was John Morant, to just like jump in front of him and steal the ball. It was like a couple of those really dicey ones that are like, man, you just can't have this from your stars. But then basically other than those possessions, they were phenomenal all night. And the Wolves ended up holding on, a couple nice offensive plays. Again, Randle was big late to like put this thing away. And ultimately they win by 16. Not a whole lot else to talk about when it came to the fourth quarter because Minnesota was able to hold on. Some categories that were super important for Minnesota in this game that I was worried about. So we talked about fast break points, and Jack and I covered this a bit on the postcast last night. But Minnesota ended up tying Memphis in fast break points in this game. And again, Memphis plays at the fastest pace in the NBA. They tied 15 fast break points apiece. Minnesota had, I think, 16 turnovers in this game, and Memphis had 15, so they barely lost the turnover battle. But being that close is huge. 16 to 15 in turnovers and 15 to 15 in fast break points. If you're Minnesota, you take that all day long. Memphis wants to turn you over. They want to play fast, and the Wolves found a way to basically draw even in both categories. It was huge in this game. Offensive rebounding, you kind of have to pay attention to with Memphis. They're not as dominant on the glass as they typically are, especially without Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson was in, and Zach Edey were both in some foul trouble. But Minnesota did a good job there. Memphis and Minnesota each had 8 offensive rebounds. So to be able to limit those second chance opportunities, I think they had like one, the Grizzlies did, over the first 2.5 quarters. And it led to a 3-pointer too, by the way. So really good job there. Defending without fouling, they did that for the most part. Minnesota allowed 21 Memphis free throws. The Wolves got 28 free throw attempts of their own. That was huge in this game. And also making their free throws. Minnesota was 25 of 28 at the line. Gobert was 3 of 4. Ant was 11 of 13. And nobody else missed a free throw for the Wolves. Really important for Minnesota to win the free throw line battle. Because, I mean, like Memphis finished the game shooting 50% from 3. Like if you're Memphis, you're like, we made 18 threes. We shot 50% from 3. We were 52% from the floor. And we lost this game. I mean, that's because of the third quarter onslaught, which the offense was insane for Minnesota. I mean, on the flip side, Minnesota shot 55% from the floor, which is crazy. 45.5% for 3, which is phenomenal. Still not as good as Memphis in this game, but the Wolves did get up 8 more attempts from outside the arc. So 8 more 3-point attempts and 7 more free throw attempts. That'll do it. I mean, that's significant for Minnesota to be able to do that. Ultimately, on the glass, Minnesota was a +8. There were less defensive rebounds to be had because neither team really missed in this game. And that was all really positive to see the Wolves win those categories. Bench scoring is another one that Jack talked about last night on the postcast. Memphis has been a really good bench scoring team here, especially of late. And Minnesota's bench was good. Nas was really good. A little bit inefficient, missed some threes, but I thought he played well. He got to the line 5 times in 24 minutes, which is a lot for Nas Reid, and he was really good at the line. Nikhil was good, 10 points, 5 rebounds for Alexander Walker. Was really active on the glass and has been here of late, which is phenomenal to see. It's an important part of the Wolves offense now is offensive rebounding, but also Nikhil crashing down to limit second chance opportunities for Memphis was really big. Dante was quiet scoring wise, just 3 of 5, but they were all threes and a couple were big ones during that run in the third quarter. He finished with 9 and 4. So not a loud bench night, only a combined between those 3 guys, the bench trio we talked about extensively on yesterday's show, a combined 33 points, but effective. They made a combined 6 threes. They got to the line and were 7 of 7, the 3 of them combined. They combined for 7 assists. Like they did enough collectively as a group to support the 44 from Ant and the 31 from Julius Randle. I mean, the Wolves had 4 guys that scored between 10 and 14 points individually to support the 2 superstars. On the flip side, Memphis got 36 from Ja Morant. They got 28 from Desmond Bane. Jaren Jackson ended up with 23 points, but it took him a bit to get there. And only one other guy was in double figures, and that was Scottie Pippen Jr. off the bench with 16. He was really good in this game, but they only got 5 from Aldama off the bench. They only really had 2 bench guys that played significant minutes in this game. John Conchar was kind of like in that Jalen Clark role where he played a few minutes, but otherwise it was Aldama, it was Scottie Pippen Jr., and they didn't get anything. Vince Williams started, only played 18 minutes. By the way, Vince Williams was guarding Anthony Edwards early in the game. Ant was on Ja, but they weren't about to put Ja on Ant. I mean, he got switched onto him some, but Vince Williams was actually the matchup against Ant at the start of the game and had a tough time, we'll say. Zach Edey didn't do much. He was in foul trouble. Like, they didn't get a whole lot of role player support or a whole lot of bench support, whereas Minnesota did just that. Let's jump into studs and duds now, just because I want to save a little bit of time for breaking down what could happen this weekend. So overall in this game, we kind of already talked about the obvious 2 studs for Minnesota. Ant with 44 points on 19 shots. Unreal efficiency. 13 of 19 shooting. 7 of 11 from outside the arc. 11 of 13 at the free throw line. 5 rebounds, 3 assists for Ant. He did have 5 turnovers, was a little sloppy at times. But again, Memphis does a good job at forcing turnovers. And overall, this was a really strong Anthony Edwards performance. And other than a couple of those hiccups late, I actually don't know that he scored in the fourth quarter. He had like 24 at halftime, and he had, what did he have? Did he have 20 in the third quarter? I forget what I said. He didn't score much in the fourth quarter. It was a lot of first half and a lot of third quarter for Ant. And I mean, he was the reason they built this 20-plus point lead, and he was just phenomenal in this game. Early on, the shot making, it started with the 3-point shot, then it went to the mid-range. He got to the cup a couple of times, and then late in the game was more aggressive, had a nice and one with the left hand in the third quarter, and got to the line 13 times. And Stan Van Gundy did a really good job pointing this out on the TNT broadcast, that Ant is number 1 in the league in 3-pointers made, and he's still top 10 in free throw attempts, which tells you obviously he's a high usage player. The ball's in his hands a ton, but also that he's attacking the basket and shooting threes. And that is a legit, was a concern. Remember, go back to January, and I talked about in the show about how the free throw rate was on pace to be his lowest since his rookie season. And it's still, I think, could end up a little bit lower than last year. I don't have it in front of me, but over the last 2 plus 3-ish months, he's been awesome at getting to the line. And while the 3-point accuracy has waned just a little bit, he's still above 39%. You round up to 40%, we'll take that. The volume has still been there. So he hasn't fully eliminated the mid-range, but in this game, he was 6 of 8 on twos. We'll take that all day. 7 of 11 on threes, 6 of 8 on twos, and 13 free throw attempts. Yes, that's a great game. Julius Randle, we talked about, one of his best games of the season, 31 points on 13 of 22 shooting, 5 of 10 on threes. Weirdly, did not get to the free throw line at all, and he shot 12 twos. He was 8 of 10 on twos in this game, 8 of 12 on twos in this game, and 5 of 10 on threes. 10 boards, was the only Timberwolves player to reach double figures in rebounds. 5 assists, only 2 turnovers. After the stinker in Milwaukee on Tuesday, this was a much-needed Julius Randle game, and exactly how they need him to play in the playoffs. Third stud for me, kind of going back and forth on this one. I think I got to go with Rudy Gobert. I know he was quiet in the first half from a scoring standpoint, but he had 13 points on 5 shots, 5 of 5 from the floor, 3 of 4 at the free throw line, 8 boards, 4 assists, only 1 turnover, 13, 8, and 4. I know he didn't have any stocks. I know he had 2 points in the first half. He was impactful in limiting Memphis's paint points. He did a really good job at contesting shots, even though there weren't any stocks that showed up in the box score. There were multiple possessions where he frustrated the likes of John Morant, Scottie Pippen. He just stood his ground, put his arms up, and these dudes couldn't score. He somehow only had 3 fouls in this game. And there were plenty of altered shots from Rudy Gobert in this game. I thought he did a great job screen setting on offense too. I'm sure David Locke would be happy to talk screen assists from this one. That's famously what Locked On founder and Locked On Jazz host and Jazz radio play-by-play guy David Locke would always talk about with Rudy Gobert's screen assists. There were plenty of those in this game for Rudy Gobert. A really well-rounded game and impacted the game in a lot of ways that don't show up in the box score, which is kind of what he does. I don't have any duds in this one. Conley was a little bit quiet, but he was a game-high plus 29. Nobody else on the team was better than a plus 18. He was instrumental in that third quarter run, moving the basketball. He didn't make a 3, but he had 9 assists in this game and a steal and a block. I thought it was a solid Mike Conley performance. So, I mean, I don't have any duds. Everyone that saw the floor played well. Notably, only 8 really rotation guys. Jalen Clark played 2 minutes at the end of the first quarter, and that was it, except for garbage time. He played 1 minute of garbage time, 2 minutes at the end of the first quarter, and didn't see the floor in the second or third quarter at all. So Chris Fitch continues to tighten the rotation a bit to really the 8+ as we head toward the playoffs. All right, let's close by talking Western Conference playoffs. What's on the docket? What's on deck for tonight? What's going to happen over the weekend? I don't know, but we'll tell you what the scenarios are. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until you consider what Game Time can do for you. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing at Game Time, you see the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. I mean, there's tons of reasons to use Game Time. I like the last minute deals. Like I mentioned, the price going down closer to Game Time. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. It's not just sports. It's any sort of live entertainment, including I like going to stand-up shows. I like going to theater shows, Broadway shows with my wife. You can get last minute seats for whatever it is. Maybe it is a Wolves game. 2 games left in the homestand tonight, Sunday. You can save big with their zone deals, and you can also check out your seat view before you buy with no surprise fees and a lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so there were no other games on Thursday night with consequence to the playoff race in the Western Conference. In fact, literally nobody that is still alive. They were all Eastern Conference games except for Minnesota and then Pelicans Bucks. So no other changes in the standings following Wolves Memphis. So where do we sit right now? Minnesota, Memphis, and Golden State are all 47 and 33, tied for the 6 through 8 seeds. Minnesota loses the collective tiebreaker because they're 1 and 2 against Memphis and 1 and 3 against Golden State. So you take the 3 teams, their cumulative record against each other. So Minnesota loses the 3-way tiebreaker. Even if they had a 1-way tiebreaker or a direct tie head to head with Memphis or with Golden State, the Wolves would lose each of those individual tiebreakers too. So they're in 8th currently. They can't fall lower than 8th. That's been true for a while. Right above them, 1 game ahead of them, is the Clippers and the Nuggets. They're both tied at 48 and 32. The Clippers have won 6 straight games. However, the Timberwolves, as we said all along, have the easiest remaining schedule by far among these teams. Memphis has to go to Denver tonight, Friday night, and that's a really, really tough game, of course. Back-to-back, going to altitude, late national game on Thursday, banged up roster. That's a tough game. On Sunday, they played Dallas. Dallas is still playing for the 9 seed and home court in the 9-10 games, so in the play-in. So they're going to have something to play for. So Memphis probably has the toughest remaining schedule. Golden State Friday night plays Portland, and Sunday plays the Clippers. That's a tough schedule. Portland's been playing well. Nothing to play for, but undoubtedly young guys playing for spots. And, of course, the Clippers are in the midst of this morass as well. So the Clippers are at Sacramento Friday night. And Sacramento, same deal. Them and Dallas are fighting to get to the 9 seed and get home court for that play-in game. So they have something to play for. And then Sunday, as mentioned, they play the Clippers. Denver, I don't have their schedule right in front of me. Let me pull it up real quick. Denver, of course, has Memphis tonight, as we mentioned. And then on Sunday, Denver plays the Houston Rockets, who probably have nothing to play for. So it's fair to expect Denver to go 2-0. Like, the most likely scenario is Denver wins 2 games. Minnesota likely wins 2 games against tanking Brooklyn and Jazz teams. So if that happens, Denver gets to 50 wins, Minnesota gets to 49 wins. The Clippers, say they split. Say Memphis loses twice and Golden State splits, all plausible things. Minnesota in that scenario ends in the 5 spot in the Western Conference. Jack and I talked about this a little bit last night, but the Wolves, in a sense, control their own destiny. If they win out, they'll be out of the play-in. So they might be in the 6, not the 5, but they'd be out of the play-in. If the Wolves win against Brooklyn tonight and Utah Sunday, Minnesota gets to at least the 6th seed. There's a chance they could get all the way to 5. It's really unlikely they get to 4. Denver, and Jack and I missed this last night. Denver would have to, well, I guess I say that. If Denver goes 1-1, if they blow one of these 2 games and the Wolves win 2 games, they win the head-to-head tiebreaker with Denver. So it's still completely plausible. The Wolves could get to 4. I think the most likely scenario is they're in 5 or 6, which is important, of course, to get out of the play-in. If Memphis loses tonight, if Golden State loses one of these games, and Minnesota wins both of them, they're out of the play-in. And that's the most important thing. If you get to 6, then you're going to play very likely the Lakers, possibly Denver, but likely the Lakers in the first round. Not great. You don't really want to play LeBron and Luka in the first round. I actually kind of prefer the Denver matchup. I think I prefer the Houston matchup to the Lakers as well. If the Wolves got all the way to 5, that's very likely against Denver, who'd be in 4, possibly the Lakers. But the downside of being in the 4-5 matchup is if you win, you play OKC in the first round, or excuse me, the second round. If OKC wins and if you win in the first round, both big ifs, but your path has to go through OKC in the second round instead of in the conference finals, where if you're in the 6-3, then you don't play OKC potentially until the conference finals. Now, as Jack and I said last night, the Wolves may be the toughest matchup in the West for OKC. I truly believe that because of how big Minnesota is, because the Wolves can play in different ways. And they showed that they are more than happy to say, let somebody besides SGA beat us. And that's how they had that massive comeback at the Thunder a few weeks ago. Of course, other teams have tried it as well, and it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Thunder are 66-14. I need to repeat this. I'm not saying the Wolves are better than the Thunder. I'm not saying they'd be favored against the Thunder. Not at all. However, that's a tough matchup for OKC among all the matchups in the West. So now, if the Wolves don't win out, they're going to be in the play-in. Like, if they go 1-1 in these last 2, they're very likely 7 or 8. But if they win both, they get out of the play-in. They're at least in 6. They've got a real shot at 5 and a bit of a longer shot at 4. But it's going to be a ton of fun. And we're going to be scoreboard watching this weekend. Like I said, I'll be hosting a live postcast tonight over at Locked On Sports Minnesota with our guy Jack. And looking at the schedule, I'm trying to look at the timing of all these games. The Wolves play at 7, of course. Excuse me. The Wolves play at 8 tonight. Okay. The Wolves play at 8 tonight. Assuming my times are correct. The Wolves play at 8 tonight. So by the time the Wolves are done, we won't yet know what the final is for Golden State or the Clippers, but they'll be in action. So Jack and I can react a little bit live, I guess, to what's happening with those scores while we're doing the show tonight. And then we'll have a sense coming out of tonight. There are no games Saturday because everybody plays Sunday. That's what the NBA wants, right? Is it coming down to Sunday when it comes to seeding? The Wolves play Sunday afternoon against Utah, and all those games are 12 p.m. or 2:30 p.m. Central. So Sunday is going to be wild. We'll break it all down tonight on the postcast. Again, subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, and we'll go live about 10 minutes or so following the conclusion of Wolves Nets tonight. We'll break that game down. We'll break down the playoff scenarios in the West and potential matchups as things become maybe a little bit more clear, albeit still perhaps hazy, but it'll be fun to talk about tonight. Then, of course, I'll be back on Monday when it's all said and done. We'll know exactly what's going on. We'll split Monday's show between a bit of a post-game pod from the Jazz game, especially if anything notable happens. But we'll also maybe, if the Wolves are in the play-in, we may start jumping into some matchup talk pretty quickly on Monday as we get ready for playoffs and hopefully not, but play in next week. We'll do crossover episodes with other Locked On hosts. I'll probably have Jack, maybe Andrew Dukowitz on the show next week. A lot to talk about here in the coming days. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Also, please subscribe to Locked On Wolves daily newsletter over at LockedOnDaily.com. One-stop shop for all things Wolves. Notes from yours truly on that newsletter, but also some great other Wolves links that are compiled by the team over at Locked On, and then also some great national content. So subscribe at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get it to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.